Hi, I'm Ernie, and I'm going to take you through a quick 10-minute tour of 2016 Ohio Spousal Support Calculator. The goal of this video is to do a spousal support calculation quickly and professionally so that you'll be better able to evaluate your client's interests, and that means that when you go into court, you'll have reasons and documentation to support your client's position, which, let's face it, usually differs in varying degrees from the courts or from opposing counsels. You're looking at the main window here, and you'll notice that the screen is divided into two parts. The left side is the tree view, and it sets out the steps you need to perform to calculate spousal support and to do a tax analysis related to the exchange of support. In order to show you the program and to do a simple spousal support calculation as quickly as possible, I'm only going to complete the fields that are absolutely necessary to the calculation, and that's why I'll be skipping some fields as I complete a page from top to bottom. I'm going to start here on the General Information Worksheet, and you'll see that some of the fields are already completed. What you're seeing is the contents of the default file, and the default file is a file that seeds all new files, and it can be primed, so to speak, with common information that typically doesn't change from one case to the next. Examples are the county name, the judge's name, that sort of thing. So when you start a new file, you aren't required to re-enter this common information. It's already there. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be skipping fields that may be important for their own reasons, because for this demo, I'm only going to be entering information that is directly relevant to the spousal and the child support calculations. So I'm going to put in the names of the parties for convenience sake more than anything else, and then skip down to the child information section. I'm going to make this a shared parenting order with the father as the obligor. And I am going to enter two children. I don't have to put in all the fields for the two children, only the name, date of birth, who the child lives with, and the dependency exemption. The checkboxes to the far right will take care of themselves, and gender and social security number is not relevant for what we're doing here. Okay. Next is the income section, which is divided into three parts: wages, taxable income, and miscellaneous. In this example, wife's employment as a nurse comes first in the wages category. Notice that the screen is laid out like a W-2, and that's so that you can do a quick and easy data entry. I think the only important fields here are really the pay items, and you'll notice that when I put in the base pay, the Social Security and the Medicare withholding complete automatically, subject to your approval, of course. The name of the employer and the income tax withholding, I don't think they're really necessary, but I'm putting them in here anyway. And with that, the next thing is the non-wage taxable income, and that's going to include husband's small business, among some other things. Now, notice that when we changed pages, the program began to crunch the numbers based on our entries so far. Now, because we haven't put any income for husband yet, the program is showing mom paying dad alimony of $22,000 some odd dollars. You can see that up at the top on the button labeled currently on the toolbar near the top of the screen. This screen is set up like a tax return, so if you've access to the party's tax returns, and why wouldn't you, you can copy the information from the return to the screen very easily and quickly. I have gone to the husband's, and I'm putting in a small amount of interest income, dividend income, and the important stuff is on line 17, his income from a small business that he runs. We're also going to have to stop over quickly to the mother's tax return so we can put her filing status in there, and nothing else is really important. So with that, in our simple calculation, with that we're going to move along. Actually, neither party has any other income, so I'm going to move along to step 3, which is personal living expenses and taxes. And again, when the expense screen appears, you may notice that the support differential updated itself. Again, it went from $22,000 down to $7,000 or something, and now I think it's dad paying mom rather than mom paying dad, because he's got the higher income. Skipping everything that's not relevant to taxes, I'm only going to enter one thing on Mom's personal worksheet, and that's the child care expense of $2,150. One critical reason, however, that I'm going to the screen at all is to show you a few cool things about it. First, it's a very typical standard domestic pretrial statement layout, so you should be reasonably familiar with it, and it should be self-explanatory. Second, it's got this neat button for converting between monthly and yearly figures so that if you're entering budget amounts from bills and other documents, and some of them are expressed monthly and some annually, you can enter them directly in without getting a calculator to convert the amounts just by using the button. Third, and finally, you'll note that some of the fields are blue. Those fields denote personal living expenses that could be considered non-essential. Now, of course, while such classification could be highly subjective, on the other hand, it's not difficult to assess these amounts in terms of common sense. For example, it should be easy to see the importance of a parent and child who are not able to meet essential living expenses. Now, I'll tell you something. Rudimentary spousal support and child support calculations are now complete. They probably were about a minute or two ago, and I've done it all in about 5 minutes simply by copying amounts from W-2s and tax returns and other materials that you'll already have in your file. And in that short amount of time, I've done a decent job of organizing the marital estate, preparing a set of tax returns, actually about 30 sets, as you'll see when we go to the lifestyle screen, and we're arriving at an after-tax exchange of support that approximates equal income to the parties. By the way, you can update your calculations without changing pages simply by clicking the refresh button that's up at the top of the screen on the toolbar. Now, before I go, I'd like to show you the remaining steps in the tree view very briefly. I mentioned the child support screens, but I didn't show them to you. I will now, and what you'll see is screens and fields that are almost or are identical to the child support program. The only difference being that the fields are largely completed automatically instead of you having to complete them like you do in the child support program. You'll see, for example, that on line 19, where I've scrolled down to, the child care expenses that we entered on the wife's personal living expense worksheet has already been transferred to line 19, and the federal taxes have been subtracted out. So very cool stuff. And I believe that all the reports and printouts that are in our ever-popular child support program are also available in the spousal support calculator. With that, I'm going to move on to step 5, debts, assets and debts. And we were surprised to learn that this was a user-favorite function of the program for arriving at equitable distributions of property. And for that reason, we've restored drag and drop capability, which makes the use of the worksheet rather game-like. You enter assets and debts into this screen and enter their amounts, and then you can drag them around from one column to another. And what's cool about it is the line at the bottom of the screen totals the column and updates dynamically when you drag and drop from one column to another. That's it for that. I want to move along so we can get done as quickly as possible. And with that, I'm going to go to the ITSE form. And if there's one form or report that's more important or informative than all the others, this is it. It summarizes the party's income. It summarizes the tax calculation at the federal, state, and local levels. It gives the party's total income after being adjusted for taxes and the exchange of support. Now, I'm scrolling down here and you'll see these percentages. They're pretty near 50% there. When they approach 50%, and you'll probably never ever get them to be exactly that way, but when they do, it's telling you that you've got a good spousal support starting point because that's an equal income equalization point. Now, the ITSE form tells you a lot more, however. I just don't have time to go into it. It talks about the party's ability to meet essential and non-essential living expenses. And with that, I'm going to move on to the lifestyle form. And what you can do, you can think of this as a cross-section of 30 ITSE forms detailing 30 levels of spousal support. And when you're looking for ranges and how spousal support affects a party's ability to meet expenses over a range, this is the report that you want to check out. There's also a statutory considerations report. It's a multi-page report that is styled like a brief and covers the individual statutory spousal support considerations. I'm not going to go through too much detail with that. I'm just going to flash it up here on the screen so you can take a peek at it, and that's about it. And finally, there's the Set Spousal Support screen, which, when the parties have already agreed to an amount, it allows you to set the support at a specific level and force the necessary tax assessment at that chosen level. Finally, Step 7 includes reports like showing what distribution of child dependency exemption yields the least taxes. It can do the same thing for spousal support. And finally, it has a side-by-side screen that shows the tax returns, and it can be very helpful when you want to analyze tax considerations. Hey, that's all the time I've got. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope I've given you a good preview of the 2016 Ohio Spousal Support Calculator. Remember, if you're not using a tool like this in your family law cases, you're kind of like a tax preparer who's doing returns by hand. It's a situation you want to avoid. And because the tax issues covered by the program are statutorily mandated considerations, it's really difficult to fulfill your ethical and professional standards without using it. Leaving it up to the court is not a desirable alternative, least of all from your client's point of view. So anyway, I want to thank you for watching, and I'm going to ask that you have a great day. Bye.